Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to New York Got Game, the show that's got you covered with New York hoops as the season continues. In the National Basketball Association, we just passed the trade deadline, and both the Knicks and Nets made moves before the deadline. We are going to evaluate those moves on this episode, but first, there's some news for the Knickerbockers around one of their earlier in-season additions. On Thursday, the Knicks announced that their previous in-season acquisition, OG Anunoby, would be out for at least 3 weeks after undergoing elbow surgery. Seems like the All-Star break, which comes later this week, is coming at a pretty good time for New York. Those are our news and notes, but let's get to today's interview where we recap the trade deadline for the New York Knicks.
The Knicks are heating up.
All right, it was an eventful trade deadline where I hosted my first ever New York Got Game NBA Trade Deadline live show. Huge thanks to everybody who supported that event, but it was a trade deadline that saw the Knicks make a deal to shore up their bench that has them looking like a competent franchise. So let's break down what the Knicks did at the deadline and how their roster will look to close out this season. We are going to do it with a guy who many fans of the New York Giants know as the pre- and post-game host for those shows on WFAN and also Giants podcast host. However, this man has also been a contributor to various Knicks content over the years, and he joins me now in studio. My guy, John Schmeelk. John, what's going on, man?
Two Brooklyn guys talking hoops, man. You can't beat it.
Lex, you cannot beat this. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And people should know, like I said, this guy does stuff with the Giants, but loves talking basketball. We love to talk basketball. Two Brooklyn guys talking basketball. How's everything been? Been good?
Everything's good, man. Enjoying this Knicks season. Best Knicks team since the 90s. With the same type of 90s feel, too.
It does have that feel. That kind of part makes us feel old, but I like the feel that we have.
I have 2 kids. I already feel old, dude. It's okay.
as a fellow dad, I understand. I completely understand. All right, John, we got to get into this, and there's no way this week you cannot talk about what happened with the Knicks at the trade deadline. So fans don't know, the Knicks, they agreed to acquire Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic on Thursday by swapping out Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, and Ryan Arcidiacono. 2 second-round picks as well. So I got to ask you this, John. What did you make of this latest trade by Leon Rose?
I think stroke of genius might be strong, but I think it was a very, very strong trade for a few different reasons. One, you're shoring up your short-term issues with all the injuries they have. And that's number one, right? OG Anunoby, 3 weeks, bone spur. We'll see, again, reevaluate in 3 weeks. We don't know when he's going to be back. Same thing for Julius Randle. He's got another, I think, week and a half or so until his reevaluation after the All-Star break. We'll see where he is at. With those 2 guys out, they just don't have numbers in the front court. Now, Isaiah Hartenstein, right? He has an injury as well. Mitchell Robinson's not back. They needed bodies up front that can score the basketball. So you add a guy like Bogdanovic, 6'7", he can play the 3, he can play the 4. He's a perfect guy to help keep you afloat while those guys are hurt. Maybe still give you a chance to grab the 2 or the 3 seed so you avoid Boston in the second round of the playoffs. Throw in Alec Burks, who can step in. Brunson's got the ankle injury. You need a guy that can ball handle and score a little bit. Dante DiVincenzo can't score 40 every game, right? Even though it seems like they need that right now. So it helps them with the short term, right? Then you get to the long-term part of this. They wanted to make sure they had an expiring contract hitting into next year when you want to make your next big move for a potential third superstar, however you want to phrase that trade, right? And Evan Fournier could have been that guy, but he wasn't playing. He wasn't a playable player. So you move him in this deal, and you bring a guy like Bogdanovic that can help you this year, also only has a partial guarantee on about a $19 or $20 million contract next year. That's a very movable contract. Yep. So that then gives you the ability to make the move next year. And the third part of it, once everyone's healthy, it does give you a little bit more depth heading into the playoffs where, even though he probably will anyway, Tom Thibodeau doesn't have to play these guys as heavy a minutes as you might think in some of these regular season games, so they're fresh for the playoffs. And again, you're hedging against the uncertainty of Randle and Anunoby in case they have to be out longer than you think. So I think it really checks all those boxes. And you're not trading a first-round pick. You have all those in your holster for that star trade as well. Losing Quentin Grimes hurts. We like him as a player. But clearly there was something going on where he had fallen out of favor with Tom Thibodeau a little bit. It happens. It's fine. I hope he has a lot of success in Detroit the same way I think all Knicks fans hope that Grimes and Barrett had a lot of success in Toronto.
Yeah, I think Knicks fans do hope that. I think it's hard to not look at this trade and not look at it as a home run. Stroke of genius, I believe is what you said. However you want to grade it, A+, whatever that may be. I think it's really hard to not look at it that way. Leon Rose did a good job here. But then here's the question that Knicks fans are going to have. This is the next thing here, John. Are the Knicks a better team following the 2 trades that they made this season, right? You got the OG Anunoby trade that happened at the end of last year. So do you think they're a better team after these trades than they were at the start of the season?
Absolutely, because the pieces fit together better. And I think when people, and some Knicks fans were upset about the trade for OG Anunoby because they loved R.J. Barrett, they loved Emmanuel Quickly, homegrown guys, and I get that. You get attached to these type of players. I understand that perspective from the fans. But those guys weren't a perfect fit for this roster, right? It was going to be hard to play Quickly and Brunson together for long periods of time because of their size defensively. I think Tom Thibodeau could have done a little bit more than he did, but it still would have been difficult over a long period of time, those guys playing a lot of minutes on the floor together, right? Then R.J. Barrett with Julius Randle, your floor spacing just isn't good enough. You don't have enough shooting out there. The lane's going to be crowded for those guys on all their drives to the basket. So those guys weren't the perfect fit. OG Anunoby was exactly what this team needed. A big, defensive-minded wing that can also shoot and stretch the floor, and he might be the best player with that combination of skills in the league, aside from the Kawhi Leonards of the world, the Paul Georges of the world, guys like that. In terms of role players, he fits that perfectly, and I think we saw it when he got here with a healthy Randall, with a healthy Jalen Brunson. This team looked better than they had in goodness, since the Knicks made the finals in 1999. 100%. So that's how good this group looked together, and the pieces just fit. And same thing for this trade. I think losing Quentin Grimes and his point of attack defense could be a long-term issue because, remember, last year they put him on Trae Young, they put him on the other team's best perimeter guy, and go guard that guy, and he was able to do, that sort of thing. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, go through the list of guys they put in the playoffs, the Heat. So, they put him on those other team's best player, and he was their best perimeter defender. So now who do they put on? Let's say they get Damian Lillard and the Bucks, right? Who's guarding Lillard? It was going to be Grimes if he was here. Who is it going to be now? So I do think that hurts. But again, with the injuries, Bogdanovic gives you floor spacing, gives you size. You can play multiple positions, 3 and the 4. I think it just works.
Yeah, it's hard to say they're not a better team. It's hard to look at them and say they're not better than when they started the year by just having pieces to fit. And I've been saying this for a while, John. Fit matters. Right? It matters a ton here. Now, you kind of hit on this because some Knicks fans, they're disappointed. And they're disappointed the team traded away a good amount of their young core since last season, right? You saw Quickly and Barrett go out, Obi Toppin previously in the offseason. Those guys are no longer in a Knick uniform. Does that matter at all that this team is now in a different space without the homegrown young talent? Does that matter at all?
Not if they win.
Right, the winning
fans will not care. If this Knicks team ends up, and I do think they have a legitimate shot if they get healthy, they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think fans will be very forgiving. If you get to a point 2 years from now and they went a more veteran route with getting these homegrown guys out of here, then I think fans might look back and say you made a mistake. So if the moves work and you win, fans will be fine with it. It's an emotional reaction rather than an analytical reaction, right? I think to our previous conversation, it works from a basketball perspective, and I get people get emotionally attached, and that's what fans should do. They love players as much as they love the team. But overall, if you're Leon Rose and you have a way to improve the basketball team, but you say no because I drafted this guy, I don't want to make this trade to make my team better, that would be the mistake.
Yeah.
Holding on to the guy just because you drafted him, that's the mistake. Not moving the guy out for another player you think will make your team a better basketball team.
Right. The goal is to put the best team together to try to win a championship. That is literally Leon Rose's job, and he has to make those evaluations and those decisions.
And it's not like Anunoby's old.
No,
he's in the middle of his prime. He's right with Brunson and Randall in the middle of that timeline. So,
no doubt about that. I want to talk to you about Bojan Bogdanovic because the Knicks obviously acquired him in this deal. He's not known as a strong defender. And you talked about how good this defense looks and had the feeling of those 90s Knicks teams. Do you have any concern about him being on the court and affecting the team's defense?
That's why OG Anunoby's here. So he could guard the other team's best wing, and you could maybe hide Bojan on someone else that isn't going to kill you necessarily. Maybe he guards another team's stretch 4, where it's more of a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. He can box out. But look, he's an offensive player. So will this hurt your defense overall? Yeah, sure it will. Like I said, Grimes was their best point of attack defender on point guards and smaller guards, and now Bogdanovic is out there. He's not a great defender either. So, yes, it will hurt you defensively, but I think what he gives you from an offensive perspective, not just a three-point shooting, over 40%, same with Alec Burks, he's a guy that can run pick and roll. You can run the offense through him from time to time. If you have Brunson off the court and Randall still not back from his injury, he can be the anchor of your offense for plays at a time. He's a better offensive player than Anunoby. So I think for that reason, the Bogdanovic addition, I think, helps you more while Randall's out. Once Randall's back, I think putting him and Randall on the floor at the same time, that might get a little dicey defensively. It might. But I think leading into that, I think it really gives you a chance to maintain your spot in the Eastern Conference standings.
Look, this is a guy, I understand some fans are going to react to what I say here, and they're going to say, well, he was playing on Detroit, but he was a 20-point-per-game scorer. Somebody's got to score in a bad team. I get that.
But he was efficient shooting.
He was efficient. That's the point I was going to get to. His true shooting percentages were absolutely amazing. I think it was over 60%. Yeah. So he's a fantastic shooter, and he's really efficient, and I think he'll fit well in the offense. And when he has to play off the bench, he's going to help this bench, which had some issues, as you know, John, in terms of scoring once they got rid of Emmanuel quickly. Now, you mentioned OG Anunoby, how important he's been to this team. Knicks are going to be without their wing for at least 3 weeks. He underwent elbow surgery last week. Julius Randle out with a dislocated shoulder. He's going to be evaluated in, what do we say, about a week and a half or so. How concerned are you with these injuries mounting up for this team? And do you think they can keep their head above water until Randle and Anunoby return?
Yeah, you're very concerned. If either Randall or Anunoby, for some reason, don't return for the postseason, this team's not going anywhere. They might get knocked out in the first round. That's just the facts. You can make the argument that OG Anunoby is the second most important player on this team after Jalen Brunson at this point, just because of the versatility he gives you defensively. And I'm a Julius Randle guy, and a lot of Knicks fans, he drives them nuts a little bit. And you see the same stuff on social media that I do.
Oh, I do.
But Julius is extremely valuable as well, depending on the matchup you have and the team you're playing, whichever guy's more valuable. But they need both of those guys to be there and be healthy. So I think you made a good point. You're staying afloat, right? And I do think it's important to try to avoid the 4-5 seed, because then you avoid the Boston Celtics in round one. I think we're both in agreement. The Celtics stand alone in the Eastern Conference as the best team.
I'd say they're the top team in the Eastern Conference.
No one, I think, is even, frankly, close to them at this point. The Sixers lost Joel Embiid for who knows how long, maybe the year. The Bucks fired their coach midseason.
They're a mess right now.
They're a mess. They don't play any defense. Their defense is a huge, huge problem. So the Bucks are struggling. And then while the Cavs are winning a lot of games, I think the Knicks have to feel pretty confident about their chances against Cleveland if they see them in the playoffs again after the way they played them in the first round of the playoffs last year, right? So I think you feel good about it, and that's the point of these trades. The schedule gets a little bit tougher. They just went through a really soft spot in the schedule, so you have some tougher games coming up. But that's the reason you make this trade. So guys like Burks can play 20-30. Like Burks and Bogdanovic right now are going to play 30 minutes a game, while all these other guys are hurt. And they're going to need him to play well. And Burks was playing well before he got here. We haven't talked about him a whole lot. And you mentioned Bogdanovic's efficiency. So, yes, I think they will allow this team to stay afloat, to give him a chance to stay in that top four, hopefully for the Knicks' sake, top three seats.
Yeah, and you heard this. I believe it was Ian Pegley who had reported this of SNY about the fact that a lot of what was going on with the injuries factored into why the Knicks made these trades, as you just alluded to. Now, after trade season is over, we got to talk about the buyout market. And I want to talk to you about that, because following the trade, the Knicks, they still have 2 open roster spots here. Who would you like to see them pursue in the buyout market? There's plenty of very interesting names. One just went off the board in Spencer Dinwiddie, who agreed to sign with the Lakers. Who are you interested in the Knicks getting in the buyout market?
I would have no interest in Dinwiddie. So I don't think think that's a loss for the Knicks. I don't think he fits in the culture and exactly what they're trying to do here. Kyle Lowry is the big name that a lot of people have mentioned, obviously. He's a player that would be an improvement in terms of talent, right? He's a better player than Deuce McBride. Right now he's better. But they just signed Deuce that 3-year extension. Do they want to not play him? If you sign a guy like Kyle Lowry, Deuce McBride isn't playing, right? He's not going to play, and Kyle Lowry is going to play. So I'm not sure they want to do that, especially with the addition of Burks. I think that mitigates the need for Lowry, even though I think he is the best player on the buyout market. A guy like Marcus Morris, I think, is interesting. He is the other hedge to the injuries to Randall and Anunoby. And I think whether or not the Knicks go after someone like him, who they're familiar with, he was here with the Knicks, did a nice job when he was here. In fact, his trade is what got them the draft pick, which he used to draft Emmanuel quickly.
Which
for Knicks
got
fans.
them OG Anunoby.
Correct, 100%. So I think if they do go after a guy like Marcus Morris, maybe that tells us, as people that cover the team but aren't inside the building, that there are more concerns about Randall and Anunoby long-term than maybe we might think there is on the outside, right? Because he is that play the 3, play the 4, he can shoot, he can defend a little bit. I think that would be a good hedge to those two. But again, once everyone's healthy, he's not going to play. And that's the really tricky part of the buyout market, right? You have all these guys that you want to bring in. Will these guys want to come? Because they can pick where they want to go. The Knicks have the biannual exception, so they have an advantage from a financial perspective. But these veterans are going to want to play. So if the Knicks tell them, you'll play now, but once these guys are healthy, you're back on the bench, would they even want to come to the Knicks, Dexter?
Right.
So that's another part of this equation. Then the other part of that is the center position with Isaiah Hartenstein kind of dealing with this chronic Achilles injury. Mitchell Robinson's on his way back. I believe he's going to start on-court work shortly if he hasn't already.
After the All-Star break.
Correct. It's coming up real soon. Do you bring in a guy like Bismack Biyombo, for example, who's just a body in the middle, or do you just roll with Taj Gibson, who's just signed his second 10-day contract? So those are the guys I'm thinking about. Joe Harris, got let go, but he couldn't play on Detroit. I'm not sure how much juice he has left. He can give you some shooting off the bench. If you can get him on a minimum, I'd be fine throwing an end-of-the-bench spot at him just to have some shooting. But I think the trade made their activity in the buyout market less important because you got so much more depth with Burks and Bogdanovic coming in.
All right, we're interested to see what the Knicks do in terms of the buyout market, if they do anything at all. Maybe it's something like giving Taj Gibson a contract for the rest of the year, as you alluded to there. Jericho Sims has also been out and sick. Maybe he comes back as well, too. So
Tibbs loves some Taj Gibson, man. You know that.
You think? Yeah, he does. All right, one of the interesting things about the Knicks going forward, John, is that they still have a great deal of roster flexibility, as you mentioned, in acquiring Bogdanovic and still having a piece that they could move. This is what I've been saying to people about the Knicks. I think that's really good, right? No max contracts on the books. Still have 8 first-round picks that they can trade. Of course you know this. You've been doing this, been around this for a while. There's all this talk about the team adding another star to pair with Brunson down the road. If they're going to do that, and if that is the direction they will take following this season, what kind of star should they try to pair Brunson with? And how would that look when they try to make a move?
See, now it's funny. You said pair a star with Brunson. You didn't say pair a star with Brunson and Randall. And I think that's part of the equation here, right? Does Randall stay in that star trade?
Well, I'll say this to that, and I think that's good that you countered with that, right? And just to have the specifics on that point, I wonder if he does stay, and I wonder how much this postseason, if he's able to play, is part of that evaluation.
Oh, it's huge. And I think how he plays in the postseason is huge, because obviously his postseason past has not been stellar.
Right.
Now, I will give him a pass, might be strong on last year, but he had surgery on the ankle that he played on and through in the playoffs, and he played 2 of the best power forward defenders in basketball, in Bam Adebayo and Mobley. With the Cavs. Literally, all defensive players. So on a bad ankle, let's not kill him too much for what he did last year, right? But in terms of adding the star, Donovan Mitchell is the name that everyone's going to talk about. Understandably so. New Yorker. The Knicks were interested when the Jazz traded him to the Cavs. I got to imagine he's not going to sign an extension with the Cavaliers, which means he has 1 year left with them, and they're going to have to make a decision on him. Does he tell them, guys, I'm not coming back here? Then they have to deal him, right? But how does he fit with Brunson, to your initial question? You have 2 smaller backcourt players. Mitchell's been better defensively this year. He's actually looked more like the college version that he was, when he was a better defender. But can you have 2 6'1", 6'2" players as your starting backcourt, and they also then have to share the point guard responsibilities? I love Donovan Mitchell as a player. He'd be my team any day. One of the top 5 or 6 offensive players in the league. He's tremendous. I just don't know if the fit with Brunson works.
There's that fit word again.
Yeah.
It matters. It matters.
You can't hide more than one guard defender in a game, right? One of those guys is going to have to guard the best guard on the other team. Do you like that matchup? I don't think I do.
Nah.
The ideal target for me, Dexter,
go ahead,
is Mikal Bridges. Unfortunately, that would mean the Knicks would have to convince the Nets to trade their best player across the river to Manhattan. That's not going to happen.
No, that is not.
Now, maybe the Knicks can show up in literally 7 first-round picks and Bogdanovic. Do the Nets blink and say maybe? Sure, that's possible. I think that would be a non-conversation starter. But Bridges can play multiple positions. He can defend. He can shoot. He's a two-way player. You can fit any players in the NBA around Mikal Bridges, the same way you could fit any players in the NBA around OG Anunoby. Can you imagine that backcourt defense with those 2 guys on the floor at the same time?
Oh, I can imagine it.
It's amazing.
They're going to wreak havoc. Yeah.
Tom Thibodeau wouldn't sleep for days. He'd be so excited about it, all right?
Yeah.
But again, I just don't think it's realistic. But to me, that's the ideal target. The only other guy we should mention, I think, is Karl-Anthony Towns. Another Jersey guy. He's local. In that trade, I think we both agree, Julius Randle would have to go out
in that trade.
Those two guys, defensively in the front court, no bueno. Not going to work. You're going to give up a bajillion points. That's why the Timberwolves had to trade for Rudy Gobert, because Karl-Anthony Towns could not hold things down at center as a defensive player, right? So if you make that trade, but how much are you really improving? If you're trading them Randle and then you're trading like 5 ones, how much of an upgrade is it really? To be totally honest with you, Dexter, I'm not sure.
No, I'm with you on that. And that's where I was going to follow up on you. And I'm going to bring it back to a word that you've mentioned throughout this whole conversation. If they went and got Karl-Anthony Towns, since you just mentioned him, do you think he's a good fit, though? Does he fit for this Knicks team?
Would he drive Tom Thibodeau nuts?
Yes. Apparently he drove him nuts once before.
Right.
Tom Thibodeau was like, I've seen this movie before. I'm not sure he's necessarily a good fit. With all that we're saying, and I think this will be a good follow-up before we segue into the final question.
Yeah.
When you think about what they might do in terms of getting a star, and I think fans should take note of this too, all the names that John mentioned and the logic that he went through, we don't know what's going to happen after this postseason run. Another NBA star could become available. I don't know if it's Luka Doncic. I don't know if it's Devin Booker.
Ooh, that's a name.
Yeah, I'm starting to throw some names out there to excite the people. But we don't know is the point I'm making. And I think that when you're a team, you have to look at all this and try to see what the right fit is. I like the names you brought up. I do think Mikal Bridges is the perfect fit. Do I think that's going to happen? Nah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. And look, and you're right. You don't know who's going to shake free.
Right.
What happens if LeBron shakes free?
Well, here's the interesting thing, because somebody had brought this up to me.
Do you want to bring in a 39-year-old for your draft picks? I don't know. Well, but he stole LeBron James.
He could opt out, and you might be able to get him as a free agent.
Yeah, well, you got to figure out a way. You have to do a sign and trade. Obviously, do the cap space. Kevin Durant likes to demand trades. What happens if he decides he wants out of Phoenix? Or to your point, what if Devin Booker says he wants out? I think the player to watch, and you mentioned the name, is Luka Doncic.
I think it is a player to watch.
You could tell the Mavs are panicked, trying to keep him happy to keep him there. They traded first-round picks for P.J. Washington at the trade deadline. That's how desperate they are to win. So he is still there. He can become an unrestricted free agent, I believe, in the summer of 2025 or 26.
26.
It's 26, thank you.
And they do not control their first-round draft picks after 2027, which is interesting.
No, they're all gone. And the Knicks have their pick this year, by the way, assuming then they're making the playoffs.
Right.
But does Doncic get tired of playing there? Does Kyrie Irving say something stupid at some point that wants him to get out of there, which we all know is quite possible?
I mean, it's like minus 500 on it. Might be.
So, look, I think you keep your options open, and I think the Knicks have done a good job of keeping their powder dry, which is a term that we've heard a million times in the media, where they're not anxious to make a deal. They want to make the right deal. And I think this regime, Dexter, if the one thing that I think they've done the best is exercise patience. They have been patient, waited for the right move, and they've done a great job so far. This is when it gets really tough. Because they've done all the small ones, right? They've tweaked draft picks, trading back, trading down, acquired some extra picks. The last trade is the big one, and it's the last one they can make. All their young guys are gone now.
Yep.
Barrett's gone. Quickly's gone. Grimes is gone. All they have left is the picks. Those are all going when you make the superstar trade. If it's not for the right guy, your championship window is gone. It's gone.
And it's got to be the right fit, like you've been saying.
Bingo. So does that player become available even? And then you can't wait much longer. And this is the trick. You got to re-up Brunson. He's getting max.
Yep.
Right? And then all of a sudden you're in the apron, salary cap, and all those details. Then it's going to be hard to make that superstar trade. So you have a limited window, but you have to get the right guy. Can Leon Rose thread that needle? He's been good at doing it so far. This is the tough one.
That's the tough one. That is the next challenge. So this brings me to the last thing I want to ask you, because following these two trades that we saw in season, there's been some chatter among the fan base, some media members as well, too, that the Knicks are a team built to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I even had somebody I talked to, my man Lee Escobedo of Nick of Time Show. He said he thinks they can make the NBA Finals. If healthy, how deep of a run do you see this Knicks team making in the postseason?
If they're healthy, I feel like they're the second or third best team in the Eastern Conference.
Okay.
I feel like they're a better team than the Cavaliers, especially the way they played them in the postseason last year. The Sixers, I'm going to push aside. I'm going to assume Embiid's not going to be right or not going to be there, so I'm going to push them aside. I don't think the Heat have another run in them. They'll be dangerous in the postseason. I don't think they have another run in them, especially if the Knicks are 100% healthy. I think with OG there and Randall hopefully not on a bad ankle, I think they would beat the Heat in the playoff series. The Celtics, I think, are in a league of their own. I think they're the best team in the East. They might be the best team in the NBA. If they're fully 100% healthy, I don't think the Knicks are beating them in a 7-game playoff series. But here's the thing. All you got to do is get to the Eastern Conference Finals. A guy can turn an ankle. You can go cold shooting for 6 or 7 games. You never know what can happen. That second-round series, if this is the series that they get against the Bucks, I think will be interesting. Because I think the Bucks are extremely talented. They have Giannis, obviously, who's a monster. And then what's going to make the difference for them is Damian Lillard. He's a closer. And that's the one problem the Bucks have had over the years. It's hard for Giannis to close games because of his free throw issues and his inability to hit jump shots, right? It's hard to be a guy to win games late when you have to do everything at the hoop. It's hard. But Lillard puts a different dynamic in there. But their defense is terrible. That, I think, would be if they get them in the second round, a grinded-out 7-game slugfest where 1 or 2 shots would make the difference. And that's where I think the Knicks could be. So is there a chance they get to the NBA Finals? Sure, I think they need some help in a Boston series. But I think Knicks fans should their hopes and dreams should be Eastern Conference Finals. And they have a legitimate, real-life shot to get there. And Dexter, when's the last time we could say that?
Listen. It's been quite some time where we could say a lot of things where we're talking about fit. You mentioned the word patience. I didn't even mention the word competence here. All these things are true around the New York Knicks, and it's been a while. Like
Zach Lowe called them the smartest team in the league the other day. What, are you kidding me?
Smartest team in the league. Zach Lowe saying that. Unbelievable. I'll tell you who's smart around the Knicks. This guy, John Schmeelk, one of my favorite to talk about basketball with, particularly about the Knicks. We did it, man. 2 Brooklyn guys talking basketball here on New York Got Game.
All we needed was a ball and a hoop, and we would have felt a little bit more comfortable. That's
Maybe a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
Always good to see you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It was a pleasure.
Anytime. Keep up the great work. This week is All-Star Weekend, where hopefully we will see Jalen Brunson play in his first All-Star game. Julius Randle, who was named to the team, is out with injury and obviously will not play. We also have to look out for Jacob Toppin, who will be in this year's Slam Dunk Contest. That does it for this edition of New York Got Game. Special thanks to my guest, John Schmeelk. Much love to my editors, Kim Hyland, Antonio Oliveris-Nicole, producer Lee Insler, and director Joe Masali. Catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.